When I was in my first year of university, I discovered that I had a superpower. It felt like a touch of magic. For years, I was thinking that I was pretty special, until I found out that I was not the only one that had this power. As a matter of fact, it's not even that rare. You probably have it and don't even know it. So I'm going to tell you the story about how I discovered it and activated it. And then you too can give it a try to see if you can write better papers with less effort. Wouldn't that be awesome? So when I went off to university, I, like many people, was pretty impressed with myself. Oh, I knew that I wasn't very good at math or chemistry. I was good at the subjects that were important. Well, the one subject that I thought was important, and that was history. And I was going to prove to the world, and probably to myself as well, that I was extraordinary in this one thing, history. So I registered for a course called Honors History. The class met on Tuesday evenings, and in that first class, I found out that the entire mark for the course was going to be based on 4 papers. And the best paper of each round was going to be read, or as historians call it, presented to the class. This would be how I would make my mark in academia. I began my quest immediately after the first paper was assigned. Right after class, I went straight to the library and checked out 5 or 6 books on the subject of the paper, and I started reading them that very night. I read and I read, and I filled out note cards with quotes, and I wrote pages and pages of notes. And in the days that followed, I wrote out by hand draft after draft of that paper. I worked right up to the day when I had to give my final draft to my typist, who would type it up for 75 cents a page. I'm sure I walked into class the next Tuesday night with confidence as I put my paper on top of the stack. There was this other student, his name was Greg. He strutted into class and added his paper to the pile. He wore a tweed jacket with elbow patches, and I wouldn't be surprised if he smoked a professor-style pipe as he contemplated his thesis. I knew immediately that this was my nemesis. The following week, as the papers were being returned, I was excited and nervous. It was my first paper, but I was also really good at this stuff. I received the paper from my professor and I opened it up to the last page. It was a C. I got a C. How did I get a C? I got C's in English and chemistry. I got A's in history. There must be some mistake. To make matters worse, guess who was invited to the front of class to present his wonderful paper? Yep, you guessed it. Greg took his seat in the front of the class and he smugly lorded his achievement over the rest of us. I vowed then and there that I would show him and I would be reading my paper the next time. I knew what I had to do. When the next paper was assigned, I went directly to the library, and this time I checked out about a dozen books, and I started reading them that night. In the next weeks, I read and I filled more note cards with quotes, and I wrote more drafts and work on it until the moment I had to bring it to my typist on Sunday afternoon. It was agony between the Tuesday I put my paper on the pile and the Tuesday that we got it back. And when I looked at the last page of the paper, I got a C. Another C? I had really tried on this one. How could it be as bad as the last one? Things were getting desperate. Maybe I wasn't cut out for academia. History was the only thing I was smart in. If I wasn't smart in history, then I wasn't smart. And another thing, if you get a C in an honors course, you don't get honors credit. You get a C in a regular, plain old, ordinary history class. I'm not sure what that would have meant beyond just being humiliated, but that was enough. Thankfully, this time Greg didn't read his paper, but that was small comfort. When the next paper was assigned, I said to myself, what's the use? There was nothing more to be done. I couldn't work any harder, and, I didn't want to. Oh, I did go to the library, and I did check out a few books, and I did read them. And I did develop a working thesis, but I didn't feel like writing the paper. There was a hockey game, and a social with the girls' dorm. And I chose to watch Hogan's Heroes and the Rockford Files with the other guys in my dorm. Why break my back for another C? The paper could wait till the weekend. I got the final draft of my paper to the typist on Sunday afternoon, and when I turned it in, I wondered if I would get another C, or if it would be worse. I'd certainly put in less effort into this one. A week later, I received my paper, turned to the back page, and it was a B. I was shocked, happily, and puzzled. How did that happen? Well, maybe I had figured out the winning formula. Read some books, take some notes, write a thesis, and then goof off. Write it in 2 days, and voila! I was now a little more inspired to write the 4th and final paper. I worked harder at it, but I still kept to the formula. I read the books more carefully and spent a little bit more time on my thesis, and I collected more quotes, but I again delayed the writing of the paper till the weekend before the paper was due. Interestingly, with both these last two papers, when I finally sat down to write the paper, I found that I wasn't thinking or crafting my paragraphs like I did on the first two. Then I had to work at it. But on these last two papers, it went so much more easily. The ideas seemed to flow out of me through my pen. It was like magic. You know what's coming. I got an A on that final paper and was invited to present it to the class. And at the time, I imagined that Greg was stewing with envy, but he probably wasn't. He probably had no idea that it was necessary for him to do so. After all, he didn't know that he was my nemesis. I've written all kinds of papers using this formula, and I thought that I had this special superpower. Until I started teaching out of this book about 20 years after I had discovered my special gift. This is Perine's Literature, edited by Thomas Arp and Greg Johnson. It's an anthology. But the editors offer some instructions on how to write papers. They explain the 8 steps in writing a paper. Here are the first 2 steps. As soon as possible after receiving the assignment, read carefully and thoughtfully the materials on which it is based, mulling over the problem to be solved. And here's the second step. Then, rather than proceeding directly to the writing of the paper, put the materials aside for several days and let them steep in your mind. The advantage of this is that your subconscious mind, if you have truly placed the problem in it, will continue to work on the problem while you are engaged in other activities, even while you are asleep. Repeated investigations into the psychology of creativity have shown that great solutions to scientific and artistic problems frequently occur while the scientist or artist is thinking of something else. The answer pops into the mind where it has been quietly incubating. Whether this apparent miracle happens to you or not, it is probable that you will have more ideas when you sit down to write after a period of incubation than you will if you try to write your paper immediately after reading the materials. Well, I guess I'm not that special after all. But I was lucky to discover it so early in my academic career. And now you are lucky because you have seen this video and watched it to the end. But here is a warning. This is not a justification for procrastination. It's not just about delaying the writing of your paper. You need to read and research and develop a working thesis as soon as you get the assignment. Get that problem clearly into your head so that you have time for that incubation period. You have to have something to incubate or it does no good whatsoever. You might be interested to know that I've looked up Greg on the internet. He went on to Yale and became the vice president of a company in a large American city. And he's on at least one board of directors for a nonprofit, and he's also a nonprofit consultant. I hope this is helpful. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.